Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I am a nurse who works the night shift, and there have been 2 occasions when I have been stalked on my way home, and I'd like to share them with you. This happened when I lived in Tokyo. I was returning home on the last train of the night, and it was around 12:30 a.m. When you get off the train and exit the subway, there is a convenience store at the top of the stairs. My apartment at that time was about 7 minutes away from the store in a residential area. At that time of night, when you get off the last train home, the lights of the convenience store are pretty much the only light source in the area, and the roads are usually empty too. Well, back to the story. I was climbing up the subway stairs, and I noticed a man waiting at the top of the stairs staring at me. He kept widening his eyes as he stared at me. He was shifting around restlessly, and at that moment, I knew that the guy was weird. I ignored the traffic lights, and I crossed the road. I took a quick look over my shoulder, and I decided to quickly walk home since the situation was a bit creepy. But as I was walking, I felt a presence behind me. I looked over my shoulder and I noticed that the weird guy from the subway was following me, and he was closing the distance between us. Without any hesitation or thought, I instinctively started running. I remember running like crazy, and I was so panicked and frightened. There was no one on the streets to help me, no cars passing by, and it was so dark. I ran up a path in someone's private garden, pushed the gate aside, and I hid there. I crept around the back of the house, and it looked over a road. I saw a taxi passing by, and I saw my chance. The taxi driver must have seen how desperate I was and slowed down and saved me that night. After this event, I moved to an apartment right in front of a different train station, and this area seemed much safer as it had a 24-hour taxi rank, buses, and it was well lit, and it was busy with people even at night, so it was reassuring. I had been living in my new place for about 2 years when something else happened to me. Of course, it took place when I was coming home from my night shift. In those days when I left the hospital to go home, I used to take a shortcut through a dark alley. It was there that I am certain that I had met the same man again, and I quickly headed to the train station. I boarded my train, and I saw him again as I sat down. The man was staring at me. He must have followed me onto the train. I had a terrible feeling about this. He kept glancing at me and fidgeting in his seat. The train pulled into my station, and I got close as I could to the doors. And as soon as they opened, I ran as fast as I could, and I ran to an exit that I knew to be busy. I took my jacket, and I tried to blend into the crowds of people. When I found a safe place to hide, I looked over my shoulder, and he was there, desperately searching the area. I knew how much danger I was in. Luckily, there was a police box at the west exit of the station. In the following days, I became paranoid that the man might know where I live or will be waiting to ambush me next time that I got off at this station. I told the police everything about the man, and one of the officers seemed to know the man that I was speaking of, and then described him as perverted. When he said that, shivers went down my spine. There are lots of young nurses in Japan who work late like I did back then. It's 10 years on, and I still get creeped out thinking about it. As peaceful as Japan is, be careful while walking home at night. My name is Sarah. I'm a female, and I'm now in my 30s. I'm living a different life far from where I grew up. But there's a story from my teenage years that still lingers in my mind. one that I have never fully shaken off. It happened in what seemed like the safest neighborhood, a place that felt like nothing bad could ever touch us. I grew up in a small, close-knit community where everyone knew each other. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked during the day and the kids played freely in the streets. There was a strong sense of trust and care among the neighbors, always ready to lend a helping hand or keep an eye out for one another. My family had lived there for years, and over time, we have created bonds with those around us. It was comforting to know that we had such good people nearby. Neighbors would check on each other's homes when someone went on vacation, and there were regular barbecues and gatherings that kept us all connected. Among our neighbors was Mr. Pierce, a man in his 50s who lived just a few houses down. He was always around, helping with yard work or chatting with the parents as they watched their kids play. He was a tall man with graying hair and a kind smile, wearing thick glasses that seemed to magnify his gentle eyes. He never married, never had a child, and all I knew was that he was living alone. I had known him since I was a little girl, so I never thought twice about his presence. Fast forward, I grew older and I entered my teenage years, and I, of course, began to change physically. Like most teens, I started dressing differently. I was experimenting with fashion as I figured out who I was. It was a time of self-discovery, as you might say, of feeling out new identities and expressing myself in ways that I hadn't before. Well, that's when the letters began. They were anonymous at first, left on our porch or slipped through the mail slot. The letters were unsettling, filled with comments about my appearance, my body, and how I was blossoming into a young woman. At first, I tried to brush them off as a prank, something silly that would stop if I ignored it. But they didn't. They got more personal and more invasive. I kept the letters to myself. I was unsure of how to explain them to my parents without causing alarm or feeling embarrassed. Part of me thought that I was overreacting, that it was just someone being stupid and careless. I know you'd scold me. I'd scold myself too. I should have brought this up to any adult's attention, but I kept my mouth shut. I was a teenager, and our brains just worked differently during that age. I thought that I was the one who is getting in trouble if this comes out. But then came that night. My parents were out and I was home alone, which wasn't really new for me. I was watching TV, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, when I heard a knock on the door. I froze, I stood up, and then I walked to the door and checked the peephole. It was Mr. Pierce. I opened the door, and he was standing there, looking at me with a strange intensity that I have never seen before. My heart suddenly started to race. I didn't understand why. He started talking, his voice calm and steady. He was then saying things that made my skin crawl. He spoke about how he'd watched me grow up and how beautiful I have become, that I have somehow blossomed into this pretty young lady, how the way I dressed was a signal, a call for someone like him to approach me. He said things that made me realize that he was the one behind the letters. I felt trapped, my mind racing to find a way out, because I understood that I was not in a safe situation. This was Mr. Pierce standing in front of me, but I don't know who this man is anymore. While he was saying all of this, I didn't even realize that he was slowly inching his way in the house. Like I was in a daze and my mind was reeling, but the sound of the door closing and the lock snapped me out of it. Somehow, I managed to blurt something out. I don't even remember what it was, but it caught him off guard for a couple of seconds, and it gave me the chance to bolt towards my bedroom. I slammed the door behind me and I locked it. I didn't have a phone at that time, and my room did have a window, but it was high above the ground that I would surely get hurt if I jumped. The four walls of my room suddenly felt like they were closing in on me, and Mr. Pierce was right outside, banging on the door yelling for me to let him in. My heart pounded in my chest, each bang on the door matching my racing pulse. I had no idea what to do, and fear paralyzed me as I pressed my back against the door, hoping that it would hold. I prayed for help, for someone to come, for this nightmare to end. He kept screaming at me through the door, telling me all the things that he was going to do with me and how he would end me once he was done. I thought that that would be my last night alive. But then, amidst the chaos, I heard the faint sounds of sirens. I wasn't sure if it was coming for me, but relief washed over me, thinking that someone had heard the commotion and called for help. The banging on the door stopped, replaced by the sound of Mr. Pierce's hurried footsteps retreating. The police arrived swiftly and apprehended him though, leading him away in handcuffs. It turned out that one of our neighbors, a kind woman with a young child, had heard the noise and called the police. She hadn't been able to come over herself, fearing for her safety and her child, but she did what she could to make sure that help was on the way. I was overwhelmed with gratitude and relief. I later thanked her profusely for her quick thinking. She had acted as my guardian angel that night, and her kindness left a lasting impact on me. The incident actually shook our neighborhood. It was a wake-up call that even in the safest places, darkness can lurk just next door. But it also reinforced the strength of the community, the way we looked out for one another. Though years have passed and I have since moved away, I often think back to that safe neighborhood that wasn't as safe as it seemed. It was a lesson learned the hard way, but it was a reminder that I carry with me, ensuring that I remain aware and protective, both of myself and of those around me, especially my children. Hi, I'm Lily, and I'm 28 years old, and I work in a mid-sized marketing firm. It's a pretty standard job with lots of brainstorming sessions, endless client meetings, and the occasional team-building exercise that always seems to involve awkward icebreakers. The office itself is open and lively, with a mix of cubicles and communal tables. On any given day, you'll hear the hum of chatter mingling with the clicks of keyboards. My role as a marketing coordinator is mostly managing projects and keeping track of deadlines. I like my work, and my colleagues are generally a nice bunch, though we're all more acquaintances than friends. Among them is Fred, a quiet guy from IT who everyone knows but never really notices. Fred is always around in a distance, fixing computers, setting up new systems, and generally being the go-to tech guy. Though he doesn't go to your specific cubicle unless there is a general update or if you complain about a problem with your system or computer. He's a bit of an enigma really, polite but reserved, always ready to help, but never one to join in on post-work drinks. We would exchange pleasantries, sure, but nothing beyond that. Everything seemed routine until the day that I found a note on my desk. It was a simple handwritten letter tucked under my keyboard. At first, I thought it was an office memo, maybe a reminder about an upcoming meeting. But as I read it, I realized that it was a love letter. It was a bit flattering, but also unsettling because it was so out of the blue. The letter didn't have a name on it, just some vague expressions of admiration and a hint of someone watching me. I shrugged it off, assuming it was a prank or a mistake. I mean, who wouldn't, right? I mentioned it to a couple of colleagues who just laughed it off, suggesting that it was probably just someone messing around, or they kept teasing me that I now have a secret admirer and my single days will almost be over. A few weeks passed, and another letter appeared. This one was more personal, noting things about my day-to-day life that weren't common knowledge, like the fact that I always grab coffee from the little shop across the street before my work starts, or how I like to take my lunch breaks outside when the weather was nice. I started to feel a bit uneasy. It was one thing to get a random note, but this was different. Someone was really watching me, and the idea that they were close enough to notice these details made my skin crawl. Still, I don't know what to do about it. I hadn't seen anyone suspicious hanging around, and there was no clear evidence of who it might be. But the letters kept coming, each one more detailed than the last. They were always left on my desk, tucked under my keyboard, or slipped into my bag when I wasn't looking. I wondered if it was a colleague playing some twisted game, but no one seemed out of the ordinary. I was getting worried, but my workmates just kept saying that it was probably nothing, just an intense crush that someone had for me. But then, things started disappearing from my desk. At first, it was minor. A pen here, a sticky note there. I barely noticed it until it escalated to things like a framed picture of my family disappearing and then reappearing a few days later, slightly askew, as if it had been handled. I reported it to HR, but they couldn't do much without proof of wrongdoing. They promised to keep an eye out, but nothing really changed. Meanwhile, I noticed Fred seemed to be around more often. He didn't act differently, wasn't overtly suspicious, but something in his demeanor made me uneasy. The realization came one afternoon when I caught a glimpse of him hovering near my desk when I returned a bit earlier from lunch. He seemed startled, mumbling something about needing to check the computer systems in the area, but it struck me as odd because they already did that last week, and why was he only checking mine? I was now getting extremely suspicious of Fred. There was nothing wrong with my PC. And again, he only comes when we report something to him or if something needs some fixing. Soon after, I started receiving messages online from a profile that seemed faked. They were vague at first, and then they grew into confessions of love and promises that we were meant to be together. It was the same writing style as the letters. My heart raced and I finally connected the dots. It had to be Fred. I took it to management, who agreed to speak with him, and Fred denied everything, of course, and without concrete evidence, they couldn't take it further. They suggested that I just clean up my desk, like take home important items to me, like my family photos and stuff. They also suggested to just block the online stalker and also just to ignore the letters if I ever get more. They told me that I should be more vigilant, which only heightened my anxiety. I began to feel trapped, always looking over my shoulder. Well, things escalated further when I found a small gift box on my desk. Inside was a delicate bracelet that had gone missing from my home weeks ago. I thought that I just misplaced it or something, but it was a clear message that whoever it was, they'd been inside my house. I feel violated, scared, and unsure of what would happen next. I knew that I had to be careful, and I was more guarded than ever. Then one night, as I was winding down from a long day at the office, I heard noises from outside my apartment. My heart pounded as I approached the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. There he was, Fred, lurking just beyond the porch light's glow, trying to stay hidden, but clearly casing my place. Panic set in. I couldn't believe that it had come to this. I immediately called the police, whispering my fears into the phone. They urged me to stay inside and then remain calm, promising me that help was on the way. The minutes stretched like hours as I waited. Each creak and rustle outside made me jump, and when the police arrived, They caught Fred trying to pry open a window. He was arrested, finally putting an end to this ordeal that I've been going through. The officers reassured me that I had done the right thing by calling them and promised to keep me informed about the case. This experience left me shaken and more cautious than ever. It's hard to trust your surroundings after something like that, knowing how easily normal can turn into a nightmare. But fortunately, life at work slowly returned to normal. Well, I say normal, but ever since that incident, I always kept a wary eye on new and familiar faces, making sure that no one else tried to cross those lines again. Let's just say, if something feels off, it probably is. And in those moments, it's important to speak up and seek help because you never know what people are capable of when they let their obsession take over. So Fred, you obsessed creep who tried to break in my house, I hope I never see you again. I would like to share an experience that I've had a couple years ago, which I considered as the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. I'm Emily, 27 and female. So here we go. In today's world, social media has become a big part of our lives. And just like everyone else, I also share snippets of my day, my thoughts, and sometimes my plans for the future. It's mostly my thoughts and my art though. It's a way to stay connected with my friends and family, especially since moving to a new city for my job as a graphic designer, which was both exciting and a little lonely. The new city was everything I hoped for. It was full of culture, art, and opportunities. It had a vibrant art scene, perfect for someone like me trying to make a mark in design. I started following local art groups and events on social media. I was aiming to get involved and maybe make new friends along the way. As I settled into this new chapter, I noticed a particular user who frequently liked and commented on my post. At first, it was encouraging to have a little support, especially from someone who seemed to appreciate my art and my thoughts. This user, who went by the name ArtLover23, was a constant presence online, always quick with a positive comment or a thoughtful reply. At first, I was flattered. In a city where I was still finding my footing, having someone who appreciated my work felt nice. But gradually, ArtLover23's interactions became more frequent and personal. They started commenting on older posts and then sending private messages, asking detailed questions about my projects and also my daily activities. I figured that this was just part of the social media landscape, people being more forward online than they might be in person. I replied politely when I felt comfortable, just keeping things casual and friendly, as I would with any online acquaintance. But as time went on, I began noticing ArtLover23 knew more about my life than I had shared publicly. They mentioned places that I had visited, often within a day of my being there, even when I hadn't posted about it until later. At first, I chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe they lived nearby or followed similar pages and events. But soon, it became clear that they were tracking my movements. I'd post a picture from a cafe, and they would comment something like, that place makes the best lattes. Almost as if they had been there too. It was a bit unsettling, the way someone could be so tuned into my life without ever meeting me. I started to feel uneasy. It seemed like no matter where I went, ArtLover23 was a step behind. One day, while attending a gallery opening, I noticed someone watching me from across the room, and I just couldn't shake the feeling that it might be my mysterious follower, though I had no way of proving it. After that night, the private messages from ArtLover23 increased, and they started suggesting that we meet up. Well, this was too much. I like sharing my art and my thoughts online, but meeting a stranger who knew so much about me was a line that I was not willing to cross. I decided to scale back on what I shared online, adjusting privacy settings and being more mindful of the details that I revealed. It was a bit disappointing because I enjoyed connecting with fellow artists, but my safety had to come first. Despite my efforts, Art Lover 23 continued to comment and message, almost as if they hadn't noticed the change. It was as if nothing could deter their interest. I even stopped responding to their messages, hoping that they'd get the hint. But still, they persisted and faced by my silence. Some of you might be thinking, why didn't I just block the person, right? And to be honest, I have no answer for that. I have no idea why I haven't even thought about that. But it gets worse. The situation escalated when I received a package at my apartment. It was addressed to me, but there was no return address. Inside were art supplies, the exact kind that I used that I posted about before, and a note that read, "For your next masterpiece." My heart skipped a beat. How could someone know my address? It was a terrifying reminder that my life was no longer just my own. But maybe it was from a family member. So, before I did anything, I tried reaching out to my family, my close friends who knew where I lived, but all of them said the same thing, that they have no idea what I'm talking about. I was just fed up at this moment and I was frightened, so I decided that it was time to take action. I sent a strong message to Art Lover 23 telling them that I was aware of their behavior and that if it continued, I wouldn't hesitate to involve the authorities. I laid it all out, explaining how their actions had crossed the line and were making me feel unsafe. Their response was immediate. Art Lover 23 at first tried to deny stuff, but then they end up admitting it. They then apologized and started begging for me to not involve the police and that they will stop bothering me. Art Lover 23 finally went silent after that. The messages stopped and they seemed to disappear from my online world as quickly as they had arrived. I just felt the weight lift off my shoulders. My takeaway from this experience, and something that should be a takeaway for you too, is that we should be careful with what we share online to keep our peace of mind and safety. So, everyone, please stay safe. Hello everyone, I'm a female and 28. This year, I decided to throw myself a birthday party, something that I hadn't done in a long time. Between work and life's chaos, celebrations often fell by the wayside, but I felt like this year should be different. I wanted a chance to gather my closest friends, to laugh, enjoy good food, and just simply unwind together on my special day. The idea of a party was exciting, and as I started planning, I imagined a cozy evening filled with laughter and warmth. I planned to cook some of my favorite dishes, ones that brought back memories and were sure to please my friends. There were dishes like spicy buffalo wings, a creamy pasta salad, and a homemade chocolate cake that I had perfected over the years. And to make it extra special, I decided to try a new drink recipe, something vibrant and fun, perfect for a festive evening. But of course, to pull it off, I needed supplies. So after work one evening, I headed to the grocery store, list in hand, full of anticipation and a little bit of stress from the day. It was around 6 p.m. and the store was bustling with people getting their last-minute shopping done, and the aisles were crowded and lively. As I navigated through the produce section, I noticed a man who seemed to be following me. At first, I thought nothing of it. The store was crowded, and it was easy to end up on the same path as someone else. But as I moved through different sections looking for ingredients, I kept seeing him. He was a tall man with a scruffy beard, wearing a faded baseball cap and a jacket that looked too warm for the mild weather. His presence started to make me feel uneasy. Whenever I paused to look at something, he was there, just lingering nearby. I tried to focus on my list: olives, cheese, a special pasta for the salad, but I could feel his eyes on me, just watching. And then, he started asking me questions, his voice low and casual, like we were old friends. He was asking me how to make a good pasta sauce, where to find the spices, trivial things that felt out of place. I mean, if he wanted to know where things are, I'm not the one he should be asking. But I tried to answer politely, trying to not show my discomfort, hoping that he would pick up on the cues and just leave me be. But every time that I moved on, hoping that he'd get the message, he seemed to reappear just around the corner, still watching, still there. It became a pattern as I continued. I'd turn down an aisle and he would be there. I'd stop to compare prices, and he'd casually wander, pretending to be interested in something nearby. My heartbeat quickened, and an unwelcome sense of anxiety creeping in. This was supposed to be a simple shopping trip, but now I just wanted to get out there with my groceries and my peace of mind. Finally, I decided to just rush through the remainder of my list, deciding to skip a few items in favor of leaving sooner. At the checkout, I kept glancing over my shoulder, hoping that he would have disappeared into the crowd. But as I packed my bags and headed towards the exit, I saw him again, leaning casually against the wall near my car. My stomach twisted. The thought of approaching my car alone was too unsettling. I knew I needed some sort of assistance, someone to be with me in case this stranger decided to follow me further or tried to do anything. So I approached an employee who was stocking shelves near the front of the store. I was explaining the situation as calmly as I could. The employee nodded, clearly concerned, and then arranged for someone from security to escort me. I felt a wave of relief, thankful for their understanding and swift action. The security guard was kind, walking with me to my car as the man watched from a distance. And when he saw that I was not alone, he slowly walked away and then disappeared into the darkness. When my groceries finally packed away, I thanked the security guard profusely, grateful for not having to face the unsettling situation alone. And I drove and got home safely, thankfully. I got transferred to a rural area of Kanto with work. It wasn't the worst timing in my life, to be honest, because my child was just about to start kindergarten, so it felt like the move wouldn't disrupt our lives too much. We enrolled our child into a school, and over a short space of time, we were introduced to a few of the other parents. I was surprised when I realized that I recognized one of the faces in the crowd. I saw someone that I went to high school with, who we will refer to as A in the story. It was a surprising coincidence, but the truth of the matter was that A and I weren't that close. We were just in the same classes at school, and I'm sure you can relate to what I am saying. Just for clarification, I'm a guy and she is a woman. Bear that in mind for this next part. One weekend earlier this year, I got a knock on my door. I was having dinner with my wife at the time, and we weren't expecting company that night. I went to the door and I looked through the peephole, and I saw a strange man outside there. I opened the door, expecting it to be a neighbor stopping by, but it wasn't. The guy said, "Hey, I'm A's husband. You know why I'm here, don't you?" I don't know what to say to this guy, and of course, I didn't know why he was here. My only thoughts were about getting back to my dinner. He said some other stuff that I didn't really understand or care about, and I quickly became impatient with him and his conversation, so I cut him off mid-sentence and asked, "Look, do you need something?" And as soon as I asked that, I knew that I had just pushed him to the edge. I would expect that kind of attitude from a guy like you, because you're the kind of guy who thinks it's fine to put your hands all over someone's wife, aren't you? He was close to yelling, and I could tell that he had come here to cause a scene or embarrass me. I stood there in shock. I didn't know what he was talking about. Just as I was thinking, "Oh great, I met the local lunatic," I heard my wife padding down the hall towards the front of the door to join us. The guy at the door then thrust a piece of paper at us both and then ordered us to read it. I could tell from the first glance that it was a printout of some kind. That printout turned out to be from his wife, A's, blog. That acquaintance of mine from my school days. I looked through it, trying to make heads or tails of what this man is accusing me of. I was utterly shocked to find that the printout was a catalog of lies. His wife had imagined a relationship between her and me. It was as if she had written her fantasies down. I need to tell you a little bit about what I saw on those pages, so here it goes. I was reunited with, and then she mentions my name. I had such a crush on him at school. Apparently, he moved here through work. What a wonderful coincidence. I know where he works and what window he sits by at work. It feels so good to have him so close by again. When his wife stepped away for a few moments at kindergarten, he asked me to give him my email address, and I did it. It was such a thrill. From that day onward, I received an email from him every day. He took me out to dinner and asked me to keep it a secret from his wife. Well, I get on with his wife kind of well, but I like him too much to stop all the fun, so I went along with his lies, and I did as he asked. I can't believe that this guy is sending me such dirty emails while keeping a straight face when I see him and his wife at kindergarten. Next, he told me that he would take some paid time off and ask if I wanted to go on a drive with him to a secluded area. I did want to go with him, so we met up. We had lunch at a swanky hotel, and then we checked into our room. His fingers are mine. And it just went on and on like that. She listed more personal details about me, which I don't wish to share online, and I don't know how she found them out. Needless to say, I didn't check into some hotel with her. I didn't send her erotic messages, and hey, I didn't even ask for her email address. It was all lies. Her husband wasn't interested in my side of the story. He just said things like, "If it's not you, then who else just moved to our area that you went to school with? Who else has the same name as you? And who else works where you work?" Apparently, these rumors had been spreading for a while. It didn't feel great to know that we were probably getting pointed at and spoken behind our backs. The friends we thought we had made likely all thought that I was cheating on my wife, and that just wasn't true. I found out about the fact that A's blog post began to include plans for her and I to run away and elope, and in her words, we promised each other that we would abandon our current families. This all came out when a friend of A contacted her husband to let him know about her blog post. Her husband apparently didn't even know that she kept a blog, but became utterly furious when he discovered what she had been writing. He confronted her, and she doubled down with her delusion. He said she cried as he told him about it. I can only assume that those were tears of embarrassment or guilt, but not guilt of cheating, because she was innocent of that and so was I. Well, those tears and her inability to tell the truth led to the angry husband at my door. He didn't seem to be interested in anything I said. He was here to yell at me, and it looked like he wanted to go further than that. I showed him my phone, my emails, but it made no difference. This guy didn't want to see sense. He said that I could have deleted all the emails and calls, and I could have been using different accounts and etc. He was adamant that I had done all these things that he had read on his wife's blog. It wasn't until my wife stepped in that he was willing to listen to the voice of reason. Excuse me, but the only proof you seem to have is your wife's blog post, right? Why don't you go and see if you can gather any other evidence, and I will do my own evidence gathering this side. And by all means, if you find something compelling enough to come back here, I will open our door to you again. Give me a couple of days. And with that, he packed away all his little printouts from his wife's bogus blog and left. I was confident in my ability to be proven innocent, so I had no fear when I received an invitation from A and her husband to meet at a family restaurant to discuss our issue further. I guess that some people might find that a bit weird of me and my wife to agree to meet them, but let me just say that when you have been accused of something that you know you are innocent of, and you feel like all the eyes of the community have been on you for the longest time, then you would be eager, like me, to clear your name, I imagine. We headed to the restaurant. At least it was a neutral setting with many potential witnesses. I saw the husband there with all his printouts again. He wasn't alone though. There, sat next to him was the cause of all my problems, A from high school. My wife and I didn't come empty-handed though. We arrived with receipts, literally, cell phone records, credit card statements, timesheets, business trip information, the whole 9 yards. None of it would match her blog post, and I had an alibi for every occasion. Then, as if a light went on in the husband's mind, he turned to A and asked, "If you're not talking about this guy, who the hell are you cheating on me with?" I was so convinced that A was about to say something like, "Oh, I just made the whole thing up because I was bored." My wife agreed with this theory. I just have to quickly thank her for understanding about the whole situation because it could have been a lot worse without her support. So, we expected her to say that she made it up, but instead, she actually gave her husband a name of some other guy. I didn't know who he was though. I asked her who he was, and I noticed that there was a silence on the other side of the table. The name she spoke had significance. I looked at the man, A's husband, and he looked pale. "Are you talking about my brother?" Yep, surprisingly, she was having an affair with her husband's brother and seemed happy enough for me to be the shield for their affair. I get it. It must hurt less when it's not your brother. But why fuck up my life? A started to blurt out some reasons for her affair with his brother at that point. You always come home late. You work national days. You don't care much about your family, clearly. It was inevitable that I would end up feeling so lonely, can't you see? Sorry to say, but my brother-in-law was there when you weren't. I went ahead and asked the question that had been on my mind since her husband darkened my door. Why the hell did you involve me? Why did you make all that stuff up about me? Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused me? In response, all she did was wail like a scolded toddler. I knew that I would never get a straight answer out of her, but to my shock, she blurted out something close to a tangible reason. She said that she was embarrassed by her brother-in-law's age difference and social status. Apparently, he was older than me and only worked part-time. He took her to internet cafe dates, and it was one of those moments that she fantasized about high-class dates. And I guess that's where the blog post started. In the end, I didn't feel any embarrassment. I was proven innocent, and my wife was vindicated for sticking by my side. I was ready to walk away from this too, and I was already looking forward to have nothing to do with them ever again. Before I walked out of the family restaurant door, the husband stopped me, and he just approached me and said, "Man, I'm so sorry." I accepted, of course. He bowed his head and made a huge show of it, He didn't need to do that. Actually, that was probably the only point where I felt embarrassed, if I'm being honest. The following day, a care package was delivered to our door, and it contained expensive sake and snow crab. I guess it was another one of his apologies. In the days that followed, A's daughter was absent from kindergarten, and eventually she left the school altogether. A's family seemed to have suddenly moved too. I always wondered about where they ended up and what happened to them. I actually was lucky enough to find out a few more details when I went back to my hometown, the hometown where A and I went to high school, and I was there to attend a friend's wedding. Apparently, A had moved back. Her husband had filed for divorce and taken custody of their child. She initially moved back in with her parents, but they kicked her out for some reason. Apparently, she had lots of drinking parties where she would complain about her ex and the circumstances of their divorce. Within a month or so, she was looking for a new partner, apparently, so I guess it didn't work out with her and her husband's brother. I hope that her husband finds some peace and a partner who will treat him right. I wish him no ill, and I hope he can get over that hideous betrayal. I have to be most grateful to my wife, though, for sticking by me through it all. Even though, before we went to meet them at the restaurant, and she told me that if they could prove that I was having an affair with his wife, she said she would cut off an appendage of mine and then turn it into stew. And you can guess which appendage I'm talking about, right? Yeah, I made my wife's birthday extra special that year and every year since. I am a lucky guy to have her, and I am just so glad that all that stuff is behind us now. I live a pretty normal life, working as a nurse in the local hospital. My shifts are long and often end well into the night. The drive home is my quiet time, a chance to unwind after dealing with the hustle of the ER. It's a routine that I have grown used to, finding peace in the emptiness of the road under the night sky. But a few weeks ago, something changed. It started on a Monday evening. I was heading home after a particularly exhausting shift, and as I merged onto the main road, I noticed a car following close behind. It was a dark SUV, nothing flashy, just a typical vehicle that you'd see anywhere. At first, I didn't think much of it. Lots of cars share the road, and I assumed that the driver was just heading in the same direction. But the next night, it was there again, creeping up as I left the hospital parking lot. It didn't take long for me to realize that it was the same SUV, always a few cars behind, but never out of sight. I just thought that it could be a coincidence. I mean, that person just might have the same shift and route as me, right? But there was this uneasy feeling that started to grow in the pit of my stomach. As the days went by, I became more aware of its presence. It was always there, following me through the winding roads that led to my neighborhood. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that it was nothing, but the more it happened, the harder it was to dismiss. I started to memorize the make and model, the small dent on the rear bumper, and the way the headlights were slightly uneven. One night, things escalated. I'd stopped at a light that turned red just as I approached. The SUV pulled up beside me, its engine rumbling in the stillness. I could feel the driver's eyes on me though, and I didn't dare to look over. When the light turned green, it sped ahead, cutting in front of me sharply. My heart pounded as I gripped the wheel, steadying myself. From then on, it wasn't just following me, it was toying with me. It would speed up to catch me on straight stretches of roads, then slow down suddenly, forcing me to either overtake or trail nervously behind it. I felt trapped in this bizarre game, one that I didn't know how to win. On another occasion, as I turned onto a narrow street, the SUV swerved into my lane, forcing me towards the edge of the road. I managed to brake just in time, with my heart racing as the SUV accelerated, only to fall back into place behind me, and each encounter left me rattled, unsure of what was coming next. I started taking different routes home, hoping to shake the driver off my trail. I even tried leaving earlier or later, hoping that that would help. But no matter what I did, the SUV found me. The constant presence unnerved me, turning my once peaceful drives into a nightly dread. But the final straw came on a particularly foggy night. Visibility was low and the roads were slick with the recent rain. I just left work, tired beyond words, when the SUV appeared again. It followed closely, headlights glaring in my mirror, making it hard to see past the blinding light. As I neared the turnoff to my street, the SUV suddenly sped up, cutting into my lane and forcing me to swerve onto the shoulder. Fear and anger surged through me, and I knew that I couldn't ignore this any longer. My hand shook as I reached for my phone, dialing the police. I explained what had been happening, my anxiety lacing my voice, and they instructed me to drive straight to the police station, saying that they would send help to meet me there. Following their guidance, I turned back into the main road, trying to keep calm as I drove towards the station. The SUV stayed close, but as we neared the bright lights of the station, it suddenly veered off, speeding away into the darkness. Relief washed over me, yet mixed with frustration and fear. At the station, the officers took my report, but the mystery driver remained a ghost. They assured me that they would keep an eye out, but without a license plate or a clear photo, their hands were tied, and I just went home. The silence of my apartment, a stark contrast to the chaos of the road. The next day, the police called to inform me that they hadn't found the SUV or its driver. It's really disappointing, but I'm not surprised. But they did promise that they will update me once they find something out. But thankfully, the SUV never returned though. So, crazy creepy guy driving the SUV that followed me for days. I hope we never see each other again. My name is Mike, and I'm 35 years old. A few months ago, I made a big move to a new city, hoping to leave a complicated past behind. My old job had become stagnant, and also after a long relationship of mine ended, I felt like I needed a change to shake things up. The city seemed to offer exactly what I was looking for, a fresh start and new opportunities. The city is incredible. It was full of life and growth. It's got a thriving tech scene, which was perfect for my background in software development. There were meetups, networking events, and workshops happening almost every week, and I knew that this was the place to push my career forward and maybe even meet new people. The move turned out to be great for my personal life too. With beautiful parks and a vibrant cultural scene, I quickly fell in love with the place. Every weekend, there was something new to explore, whether it was a food festival, a music event, or just a quiet walk in one of the many green spaces it had. It felt like the city was breathing new life into me, and I was grateful for the change. As I settled in, I joined a community gym and I started attending a few local meetups to make new friends. The people here were friendly and welcoming, and I soon found myself with a decent circle of acquaintances. One of these new faces was Jenna, a lively and enthusiastic person who seemed to know everyone. She was always eager to help out, offering tips on the best places to go and introducing me to her network. At first, I appreciated Jenna's friendliness. She appeared whenever I needed advice or company, showing up at meetups, gym classes, and even at local cafes where I worked on my laptop. I brushed it off as a mere coincidence, figuring that we had similar tastes and routines. But then, Jenna started showing up more often and in more places. It felt like I couldn't attend an event or grab a coffee without running into her. She'd always be there, ready with a smile and eager to chat, knowing more and more about my schedule and my habits. It was flattering, really, but it also began to feel a bit overwhelming. I started to notice Jenna's influence creeping into other parts of my life. She began arranging social outings and subtly steering me towards certain events. Whenever I hesitated, she'd gently insist, making it hard to refuse without coming off as rude. Her enthusiasm was hard to manage, and I found myself participating in activities that I hadn't planned on, just to avoid conflict. I know, it does sound a bit like I'm a doormat, but oh well. Things started getting uncomfortable when Jenna began showing up at my apartment building. She'd be there under the guise of dropping off something that she thought that I would like, or just passing by on her way to another destination. It was really too much, and I just couldn't call a coincidence anymore. One afternoon, I returned from work to find a care package at my door. It was filled with snacks, books, and little things that I had casually mentioned enjoying. The card simply said that it was from a friend, but I knew that it was Jenna. I felt uneasy, knowing that she'd taken notes on my preferences and gone so far as to leave something at my home. Some would say that it would be flattering, but honestly, I felt it suffocating and creepy. It was just too much. Plus, despite the fact that I was single, I was not in the right mindset to be in any relationship so soon. As I mentioned earlier, I broke up from a long-term relationship just before moving, and my heart has not fully recovered yet, as corny as that may sound. So, I try to distance myself, attending fewer meetups and changing my routine slightly just to avoid constant run-ins with her. This seemed to only increase Jenna's presence though. She would text me and call me, asking why she hadn't seen me around and offering to meet up for coffee or lunch. I struggled to respond politely, hoping that she would take the hint, but she didn't. The breaking point came when Jenna found out about a new job opportunity that I was considering. She began pushing me to apply, even reaching out to contacts of hers to put in a good word for me. It was a well-meaning gesture, but it felt invasive. I hadn't even made up my mind about the job yet, and here she was, taking steps on my behalf without my consent. Feeling cornered, I decided that it was time to have a conversation with her, and I needed my space back and I wanted to draw a line before things escalated further. It was a difficult decision because Jenna genuinely seemed to want to help, but her actions were just crossing boundaries that I wasn't comfortable with. When I finally confronted her, I explained that her constant presence and involvement in my life was overwhelming me. I told her that while I appreciated her kindness, I needed her to take a step back. I also mentioned that if she continued to ignore my boundaries, I would have no choice but to completely cut her off from my life. Her reaction was a mix of surprise and hurt, but I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. I think the mention of that scared her enough to make her understand the seriousness of the situation. She apologized, promising to give me the space that I needed. After that confrontation, Jenna did keep her promise. She stopped showing up unannounced, and her messages became less frequent. I sensed that she was keeping her distance, which allowed me to finally relax and enjoy my new life in the city. This experience taught me how important it is to set boundaries and speak up when something doesn't feel right. Please, don't be like me. It took me a couple of months to do it, but I can tell you that it's definitely worth it. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared because your fear feeds me.